Living Adventurously is brought to you in partnership with Komoot, the route planning and navigation app that helps you make the most of your outdoor adventures. Whether you're cycling, hiking, running, or bike packing, Komoot's easy-to-use technology will get you out the door and exploring more of the great outdoors. You can see where I've been exploring by checking out the highlights of my journey on Komoot. Just follow the link in the show notes. My name is Alistair Humphreys. I set out on a bicycle journey around Yorkshire to speak to interesting, ordinary people who, in very different ways, are making an effort to live adventurously. I wanted to talk about what they do, about the barriers they've faced along the way, and to seek their perspective on some of the big questions that all of us encounter in our lives. Welcome to Living Adventurously. I've written here, needs intro music. Okay, here we go. That'll do. Modern life is such that it is hard to see beyond the present. You think you know somewhere, but really you only know a layer, a moment. Most people don't notice such things, but just look around you. So writes Rob Cowen in Common Ground, his book about spending a year discovering and exploring a square mile of wood, meadow, hedge and river on the edge of Harrogate where he lives. I met Rob at his home, but before we even sat down, he took me off to his allotment to pick up some ingredients for lunch. And after that, he took me on a walk down to the River Nid through the landscape of his book. We sheltered from occasional downpours of heavy rain under a big clump of beech trees. And we talked about whether there is any wilderness left these days, about the importance of these urban edgelands that we were amongst, and what drew Rob back home to Yorkshire after living down south in London for years. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Rob, thank you for taking me to your allotment.
That's a pleasure.
Teaching me that chard is not just disgusting.
No, I really hope you've turned a corner on that.
Yeah.
Do you think you have?
Well, yes, if someone's cooking it for me. It was very nice. Although, in fairness...
Should you tell your listeners what was done to the chard or not?
Go on then.
Right, so I sort of agree that chard isn't very nice boiled. In fact, it's horrible. But if you cook garlic in a pan with oil, we're back to the pan, and then add anchovies until they disintegrate, and then add the chard that's been chopped up, then pour in double cream, salt and pepper, and let that cook right down, and serve that on toast. It's amazing.
You could argue that anything with a load of double cream is going to taste nice.
Snails, for instance.
Yeah, that's essentially the essence of snails, isn't it? It's just nice sauce.
Essence of snails is the...
L'essence d'escargot.
the aftershave that never sold.
Okay. So I'm down with Rob, sitting in... Is it fair to say one of your favourite places? Or
yeah,
a place that's special to you?
Both of those.
Where are we?
We, right now, are on a little stretch of the Nid River, just a couple of miles outside of Harrogate in North Yorkshire. And this is an area that's special to me because it's the area of edgeland, of that strange piece of land, if you like, that strange territory that exists between the urban and the rural, that I wrote my book Common Ground about. And this was a place I spent an inordinate amount of time, day and night, seasons. So it is very special to me, yeah.
And is this wilderness? What is wilderness or wildness in your book? Does this count?
I mean, I think it's hard to get a definitive idea about what wilderness is in this world because there are so few areas of any true wilderness left. I suppose what is interesting to me about this place is that it has a wildness to it in that it was a place that had this intensely long and rich history, dating all the way back to the gorge here, the river gorge here was cut by retreating glacial meltwaters at the end of the last ice age 11,000 years ago. And ever since then, it's had Mesolithic hunter-gatherers moving through it. We were talking before about it was part of the Royal Hunting Forest of Knaresborough. In fact, the river in front of us here was the northern limit of that. So exactly where we are now would have had Norman and Plantagenet kings hunting here. It was a very important wood that was almost destroyed during the Civil War, but then regrew. And then, you know, over there is the old railway that ran through this patch of land. So it's got a deep history, and I think what's interesting about it is for a long time between the decommissioning of the railways and the time I found it here, it was given over to wildness, i.e. it wasn't looked after. It was kind of, in fact, it was abused. What's amazing is that when they started clearing this river out in the 80s and the 90s for the first time, they found 7 submerged cars in here, completely submerged, and they had to get the Harrogate Diving Club, if you can believe that there is one, to come and drag them out. And they had got the Army Foundation College to come down and drag them all out of the river. But really, it was left, and as a result, you have this density and this rich ecosystem of plant life, flora and fauna. So when you're down here, you can see everything. I mean, over there is a giant American skunk cabbage, which you can go and look at, which is an invasive species. You've got Himalayan balsam, but you've also got these classic wildflowers of Britain. You've got woodpeckers over there. You've got roe deer. You've got otters in the river. You've got trout. You know, it's such an intensely rich patch of ground on the edge of one of the busiest northern towns, and I think that has wildness myself.
But none of you're saying this was abused. So essentially, when you were born, when I was born, up for the decades until then, this place like this were just ignored, abandoned, trashed, used, abused. No one cared at all. And it's amazing in a relatively quick time, the renaissance in wildness, isn't it? It's reassuring.
You know, if you remember, I remember it. Well, you're from Yorkshire. In the 80s, there was a time when me and my mates played in these places, and everybody played in these places anyway. But then there sort of came this period, which I've written about in Common Ground, which is interesting to me because it's when TV really and videos started really kicking in. Everybody had them in their room. And I remember the first time I ever watched Star Wars on a video cassette in somebody's room, thinking, my God, you know, the whole world was out there. But what was interesting is that these places began to be viewed with suspicion because they were the places that people, you know, went and drank beer illicitly, or, you know, had sex, or, you know, took drugs, or
Submerged cars.
Well, they were all burnt out and pushed in.
Exactly.
And it's one of those places, and it began to be viewed with suspicion, which was very strange. But then as a dangerous space, I guess. And parents, I think what happened is that subsequent generations, parents didn't want to. Why would you expose your children to these kind of risks when you didn't have to? You know, I mean, there was no question of it when I was little. But now, you know, if there's some kids who are 6 or 7 years old or 8 years old said, I want to go down there on my own, you know, I can understand, being a parent myself, that there'd be resistance to it. But I think, that's when these became demonized. They fell out of our vision. And there were national parks and there were places of beauty. There were sort of, you know, the vision of the wild in Britain was the Lakeland Fell or the Yorkshire coast or the South Downs. It wasn't these patches. Yet conversely, these are the closest green spaces to most people in Britain today.
These are the places where it is possible to have wildness plus the realities of a 9-to-5 job.
Correct. And accessibility is everything with these places. Like, I can finish, you know, writing for a day and run here in 15 minutes and run right down where we're going to go in a bit and sit on a log there. And just, it can be like we're in Canada, you know, that's what it feels like. So, I mean, I think we talked about it before a little, but having that accessibility, being able to see some place through seasons, through weathers. I mean, we're sitting here in the rain now, but seeing places through the weathers, that's exciting. That's when you really link back in, I think, to these places.
So do you, presumably in your course of writing, you've been here in all kinds of weather? and all
Yes.
seasons.
Yes.
What's your favourite season and favourite weather to be down in this gorge?
Oh, I like high summer. High summer is beautiful here for various reasons.
Hello.
Hi there.
Fisherman.
Yeah, there you go. After a few trout. But yeah, so high summer's great here. It's just the dappled light that comes through the trees is stunning, and the river reflects. The nid actually means shining in Celtic, and
It's very dark, isn't it?
yeah, you get the right light here, and it just reflects completely. But I also love winter here, and you come down here in winter, and the trees are stripped back, and you get this ghostly mist that just hangs through the gorge. It's a beautiful time to be here. But honestly, I mean, autumn is outrageous, as you can imagine. There's all these different types of trees that we have here now.
It's nice to go to the same place in all different seasons and different times of day, isn't it?
I think it helps metronome the time passing, and I think that's something that modern living can mediate against is the awareness of change and time passing.
I was talking to a guy in Sheffield a few days ago who'd been part of the campaign against them just chopping down all of their trees, which they currently seem to be enjoying doing there. And he was saying that in the poorer parts of town, the tree at the end of the street is often people's only connection with nature. And beyond the health benefits of absorbing particulates and things, one of the things he was talking about was this is the only way you can innately know what season it is, because we continually live inside. So having a tree at the end of your street
I felt
important.
I lived in London for 10 years, and having moved down there from Yorkshire, living in the kind of wilder stretches of Yorkshire moors and everything, excuse me, you could feel that very much when you moved down there. And trees were a really important way of metronoming those seasons changing, I think. Only now are we fully investigating how beneficial that can be, I think, to us as humans. But it's light as well. I think light's interesting, the way that the places like this, if you come out here at 4:30 on a winter afternoon, it's dark, and you feel that sort of imperative to go and nest up and get into bed, Come here on a high summer day, it's 10 o'clock at night, it's still bright and sunny here. You can still swim in the river, And there's that sort of sense of, I think that's certainly, my moods are suddenly governed by that kind of thing, to a degree.
I think one of the big differences between being in a city is in a city you have 24-hour controlled light, temperature. It's all regulated. What you lived in London for quite a while, and now you've come back up home to Yorkshire. What have you noticed in the different attitudes towards wildness in London compared to up in Yorkshire?
Yeah, well, I suppose this bit of Yorkshire, the proximity of wildness, if you want to call it that, there's a very big dog just jumped in the river. The proximity of that is something that people don't take for granted, but they're grateful for it. They know it's there, and it's something people talk about. If you ask why do you live here, what do you like about living here? Often here, if you can imagine that this patch of England is like the rib cage of a body, One side of it is the Yorkshire Dales, the other side is the North York Moors, and you've got this central area where we live. And I think people really appreciate that. You can get to the coast. The Yorkshire coast, the Jurassic coast is fantastic, up Staithes and Robin Hood's Bay, Whitby. You can get up into the North York Moors, which is very dramatic in one sense. And then the Dales is a very different landscape. So I think it's much more hardwired into you here that those are places to go to.
It's definitely all around everywhere. But do you know the people that you say, the people on your street, do people come here? Do people use this space?
What's interesting about this place, I think, is that it was off the radar. Totally
until your
off
book.
The radar. Well, until the book,
there's the T-shirt shop over there.
Oh, yeah.
And the burger van.
Yeah, exactly. The Rob Cowen shrine that we're sitting in right now.
Put up by you.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for your help with that.
Carry on.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
you're saying it used to be quiet?
It was quiet here, and when I first moved to the street we live on, I asked people about where to go and where the nearest open space was, and everybody said the Valley Gardens in the town, which is the ornate Edwardian gardens in the centre of Harrogate. No one really, certainly no one pointed me this way, and when I came down here, there wasn't anyone here. But that astounded me, because I think this was certainly, in a natural history sense, one of the most important areas in this county, but equally historically it is.
So is it getting busier now?
Yeah, I think it's
why?
changing. It's changing. Well, one big reason is because there was the threat of it being developed. They're building a relief road. There was this talk of building a relief road, which now hopefully will be thrown out. But you never miss it till it's gone, do you? And the threat of something like this being destroyed and being taken away made people sit up and realize that the community has really come together over it. And people have been very vocal and very, you see people, I think they do have this innate connection to places like this, and they might not come down all the time, but just to walk their dog in a place like this, or to, to come down here with their kids and push their bike along the old railway, the idea that would be taken away as a proximity thing is very scary, and people react very strongly against it. It's almost a kind of, it's as people react as strongly as if their house is being taken away.
Wow.
And that's the way that people have felt about this. That's why the reaction has been huge. Community groups, rallies, mass walks, protests. It's been massive, which is really positive, I think.
Yeah. So when you're, say, up in your house in the town,
yeah,
and then you think you're going to come down here, do you have the sense of, I'm going to go out and then I'll be in nature?
Oh yeah.
Or do you have a feeling that wherever you are, you're in nature? So on your street, in the allotment, or does this feel?
Oh, well, I do feel that. I mean, I do feel that. If there's some maidenhair fern growing out of a wall, I feel like that's nature. I feel like the town is often like a curtain, and occasionally there are threadbare bits where nature pokes through, whether that's a sow thistle coming up through the pavement, or a dandelion, or some blue alkanet flowering, or buddleia bursting out of a train track, or whatever. I love those bursts of condensed wildness, if you want to call it that, those condensed, evidence of the bigger, greater, non-living world that we exist with. I love that. Those things thrill me beyond compare. Same in the allotment. But more here, it's that if I need the sort of massive transformative shift in the senses, this is the equivalent of like diving into a swimming pool, rather than just kind of looking through a window. It's just so complete. And I think, what I would say is that it's never the same. I always go down and think, well, maybe I'll see this and maybe I'll see that. And I never see what I'm expecting to see. I always see something else. And that's the beauty of it too, and the changing nature of it, I think.
I love that. I love one of my favourite things is being under a tree canopy when it's pouring with rain. It's rattling down.
It's amazing. And, it's, I don't know, places take on a greater meaning because you go to them. I mean, I've laid under this bit here with my children looking up at this canopy in very hot weather, and the sun being, diffused by the moving canopy in a breeze, and thinking, lying here, feeling the earth turn, and just thinking this is as good as it gets, And now, as a result, whenever I'm here, part of me is remembering that. Maybe not always consciously, but that's how you connect to places. And
I think that's the benefit of going to the same place repeatedly versus
that's right,
continually moving on to new places, which has different appeals.
I wrote about that in Common Ground a lot, about place being a repository of memory. And it's an Aboriginal concept, but it's one that I think holds true in any place and any culture where people have a connection to landscape. It's true. I think it's always interested me how two people can move through a landscape and for no apparent reason have a similar emotional reaction to that space. yet they don't know why they have it. You know, I've always been interested in that sort of idea. The aura of place, I think you might call it. It's something I'm looking at a lot at the moment with the road, and the aura, the sense of aura.
So I'm
just a gun going off in the background.
Yes, yeah, have been listening to the nice buzzers. Now a gun just went off.
Yeah. There you go.
So I'm cycling around Yorkshire for a month, and I knew I'd see some pretty hills and some flat caps and some whippets and some curries and other stereotypes. But what I've really enjoyed were places like the Teesdale Way, heading out of Middlesbrough through all of the old factories and the steelworks, past the pipelines, and it smells like a chemistry lab and looks like the Soviet Union. And then I really loved the cycle path along the River Don by Doncaster when you go under the A1 motorway.
Yeah.
So I
know that bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your approach and your thinking of these in between spaces? The edgelands, you call them in your writing.
I mean, they're fascinating, aren't they? Because they are, for the very reasons you've just described, they're sort of microcosms of the world at large, in that they are this constant collision and colluding between past, present, nature, town, nature, people. You get all these collisions where you have, as you say, post-industrial factories and collapsing and being overtaken by greenery. It's very Richard Jefferies after London, but I think there's something in that. I find that both frightening in a sense and thrilling, but also consoling. And here in this edgeland, you can see how nature has recolonized everything and recolonized the old railway sidings we were looking at before. I think that's what makes them so fascinating, is that they seem to have an aura and a presence about them because they have this human layer as well. They're not just a pristine landscape. They've been lived in, they've been worked, they've told a story. They're like kind of the old guy in the pub, covered in tattoos, drinking a beer in the corner. He's got stories to tell.
Some stories.
Yeah, I always think that, and I think they're overlooked in that in a natural sense, but they're overlooked in a historical sense too, because there's so much social history that went on. You're talking about coming out of, Doncaster. It's amazing to think of that place as what it was, and now it's kind of like dirty old Donny or whatever. And but it was a boom town. It was a Roman town. It was a boom town for mining and industry. Had a race course, still has a race course, but it was this kind of prestigious place of money and wealth, and you get that intersection when you go into those areas of the past and the present, and they're the kind of places that intrigue me. Those liminal edges that you can really see that they have a threshold feel to them that tidied up, resmartened, overbuilt sort of town centres lose, or can lose. But those places, because they're marginalised and they're forgotten about, they retain them, and it's much closer to the surface. I once went and did a talk in Singapore about edgelands, and Singapore is about the furthest place you can imagine has an edgeland. Yes. It's completely built up. But I gave this talk, and a doctor at the university there called Sean came and found me afterwards and said, "I want to show you our edgeland." And he took me the day after down to the old railway that ran from Malaysia down through Singapore, which is now completely overgrown. But we had to scramble down through this sort of section of the CBD or whatever it was, and it was very odd. It was this descent down with the tower blocks towering over us, but we had to climb over these fences and then scramble down, and we hit this railway, and it was like a subterranean corridor of complete wildness. It was jungle, so there were monkeys down there. There were all these old, basically allotment trees, if you like, fruit trees, rubber trees that had come back up and reflowered, and so it's thick with this kind of strange. And we kept walking and crossing over these old bridges, and I thought, how long can this go on for? But it just kept going and going and going, threading up through Singapore, and then we hit this old station, which again was completely overgrown. And we went inside this old station. All the roof had come down. And on the wall, I remember on the wall was this fire extinguisher from Horsham in West Sussex.
Wow.
It just said, perfect, 1930s or 40s fire extinguisher that was just completely, no one had taken it down with all the writing on there. But that's what I mean, that these encounters that occur in these places, not just with the natural world, but with the past, with these layers. They're all multi-layered spaces. And that's always interests me.
Yeah. I love pristine wild places. Of course I do, but there are zero of those in Yorkshire. I mean, the Yorkshire Dales is a fully man-made landscape. I imagine pretty much everywhere is to by and large. And therefore, in my mind, the beauty I found of those around the South Yorkshire towns, I really felt like I was exploring places I've never been before. And they felt like the most adventurous part of this journey. I was fully expecting the sweating up big climbs and stuff, but that has felt to me like really sparked my curiosity.
Did you go to the old ski slope in Sheffield?
No, I didn't. Ski slope. Should I've done?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I need a second lap of Yorkshire.
It's really strange. I went there with a folk singer called Nancy Kerr and her husband James Fagan, who live in Sheffield. And they took me up there. And the funny thing was, it's the sort of dry ski slope
matting stuff.
It's all there, but it's recolonized. So the sort of everything's come through. It's this post-apocalyptic kind of vision. But what's funny about it is I had this absolute clear memory of going there as a kid and skiing there, which I'd completely forgotten about until I was back there and I had the same views and everything. It's so strange.
Wow.
So strange. But, seeing something like that in your own lifetime is
shows you're getting old.
Well, that's it. That's true too.
Ozymandias. Yeah. Your empire is crumbling all around you.
Well, knowing that you are slightly older than me, no, slightly younger than me, aren't you? Wow.
I'm younger than you and I've got a lot more hair.
Whatever. I've got hair like Al, it's just not on my head.
Okay. Right. The next question, actually, this is the final thing I want to talk about really, is another of the reasons that I've come to ride around Yorkshire is because I was born here. We were born in the same hospital.
We were.
A couple of months apart. We're awaiting the blue plaque.
We are.
That you and I are going to put up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're born there.
Yeah.
Both grew up in Yorkshire.
Mm-hmm.
Both then went off to do different things in life. And you're a returner, is the technical term.
I am.
Did you know that?
Is that really?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
I did a talk recently for the Yorkshire Dales and the Lakes have got this thing going on to try and get more young people living there. So it's not just old people and second homes, trying to get people actually living.
So what am I, a young person now?
No, but you're not a young person, but you are a returner.
Right, okay.
Which means that you have been lured back from the bright lights of London to Yorkshire. So what is home and why have you come back?
Well, what is home? Wow, what is that? Did you see that?
Moorhen.
It's a moorhen, yeah. It's a moorhen chick, actually.
Yes.
It's very small. What brought me back? What is home? Home is a strange one, isn't it? I mean, in the course of writing this, researching in this new book, you learn that home is a fluid thing, I think. What I've always felt is a connection to Yorkshire and the moors and the landscape here and the people. And there was no way I could do what I'm doing now here at that time, but also for various reasons that I just needed to get out of here and
get out of London.
No, get out of Yorkshire.
First
time around.
Yeah.
I went to school in Leeds. I went to university in Leeds. I went to art college in Dewsbury. I mean, I was really West Yorkshire'd out by the time I was in my early 20s. So I wanted to get out. My brother had moved to London, and so it seemed like a good idea. Also, writing just wasn't something you could do up here, writing and becoming a journalist. It just seemed like London was the place that you could make that happen. And I was playing music at the time, and I wanted to go down there and play music, and there was a band that I wanted to be in, and So there's a lot of reasons why I moved there. Funnily enough, the places that I lived in, which was Archway, Kentish Town area, and then Highgate later on, were all the old manors of my dad when he was younger. He was from Chalk Farm and Camden and Weedington Road in that area. So there was a big weird sense of home that I had then. Because I remember going down there with him when I was little, wandering about those streets, and all of his family, even though they'd become this kind of diaspora and going all over the place, they all remembered growing up in those streets and living in each other's houses. So that I always had the sense of home there, even though I never lived there. And then we were close to the Heath, and the Heath in places reminds me of Ilkley Moor, similar high grasses in summer, places to swim. So living close to that, running distance of that, I used to run there every night, and that was great. But no, it was more that, I missed Yorkshire. I missed the moors, and I missed the places where I grew up. So that was like some young lads on mountain bikes just going past there.
Muddy kids.
That's a good sight, though, isn't it?
That's really good.
Isn't that a good sight?
3 kids mucking about on bikes, getting muddy.
I half wanted them to shout at us or say something rude,
Yeah.
Just for a little bit of spite.
This is Harrogate, though.
This is Harrogate. They just gave us some caviar.
Yeah.
No, so that was it. I missed the moors, and I used to have this tangible thing where I would, at a certain point, I'd be getting on the tube and sort of someone's armpit in my face, and I'd just be able to smell the smell of Ilkley Moor in summer, high summer, and hear that sort of hum that you got right on the tops there, just around August when the bilberries were out, and you'd get that feeling, and I could almost very tangibly feel it. And I would then go, I need to come back, and I'd sort of skive off a day and go home. But then, I just, when it came that we were looking for somewhere to live that wasn't London, and we needed a bit more space, there was no question in my mind about coming back, really. There's something about this place, there's something about Yorkshire that, it's funny, I used to say it to people, but it's true. People from Yorkshire tend to say they're from Yorkshire before they say they're from England. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Where are you from? Yorkshire. You go see them and meet someone in Spain. Where are you from? Yorkshire. They don't go the UK or England or Britain. They say Yorkshire. It's a funny one. There's a kind of whole identity, I think, here. Maybe it's the Danelaw stuff. It's the old Viking stuff. It's the sort of difference of the North. But no. What are you about you? Are you going to return?
Oh, well, that is a can of worms. I think I'm going to be down south for a while, and then I'm going to head for the hills at some point. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see this as a recce trip.
Right.
One day. Not sure when, but one day.
Good.
Yeah, but it's been good.
Well, you'll be a returner. You'll be welcome.
I will be a returner. Rob, thank you very much for cooking me chard.
It's a pleasure.
And showing me your common ground.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Al.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Living Adventurously. There's show notes from every episode on my website, alistairhumphreys.com/podcast. If you have enjoyed it, please take a screenshot of your phone and pop it up on social media, or leave a review with your podcast provider. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much. I teamed up with Komoot to make this podcast happen. In case you missed it, Komoot is an outdoor planning and navigation app that helps you explore more of the great outdoors. One of the many ways Komoot helps you have better adventures is through their inspiring collections. Are you exploring a new area and not sure where to begin? Type in where you want to go, and local collections will suggest a number of cycling or hiking tours based on the most scenic routes. It's a great way to get started exploring in a new place, particularly if you don't know where to begin. Wherever you find yourself, your very own outdoor experiences are waiting for you. Go explore more with Komoot. Head to komoot.com/chi and use the voucher code ADVENTUROUS to claim your free region bundle